Someone called me recently upset with the decision that I made. The person subtly told me that I should reconsider or change my mind. But in doing so, they used religion to make their point. Now, my initial reaction to what they were saying was anger because I generally don't like when people use religion to control others or if they suggest how God feels and what they're suggesting is different from how you feel. So I thought about the situation and I discussed it with my coach, and she reminded me of a very important filter that should be used to evaluate the advice that we received. She asked me if the advice benefited the person who was sharing it. In other words, did the person who was telling me what they thought I should do, did they have anything to gain from their recommendation? Now, this was a question that I hadn't considered before I spoke to my coach, but it made so much sense. And in my situation, the advice did in fact benefit the person who engaged me because it supported their comfort while it was supporting my discomfort. My coach then advised me to be careful of accepting advice from people who have something to gain from the advice that they give. Now, you may say, okay, well, this is common sense. We all know this. But when you engage in a conversation and one party is really charged up and full of emotion, if you're not careful, you can be swept up in that emotion as well. And so things that are common sense and things that you might normally consider can be brushed aside. Now, to be clear, gain could be as simple as you behaving in a way that makes the other person comfortable. Certainly, gain could be financial gain or a boost in status. But the bottom line is that if a person wants you to do something that will enrich them in any way, again, enrich can be beyond finances, we have to filter what they say and carefully analyze the advice. As I was thinking about this, I thought about the other filters that we should consider when we are trying to make a decision or trying to make a good decision. Hi, everyone. This is the PR Whisperer, and I'm a public relations coach. I train leaders to help them deliver their message more effectively and also get the attention that they deserve. But I'm an observer of life. And so in the commentary that I share, I will share observations that have come up for me. I typically do that through the lens of faith and then also through the lens of public relations, since that is the field that I spend the bulk of my time in. So there are 6 things that I think that you should consider when you're evaluating advice and trying to make a good decision for you. The first thing that you should consider is whether or not you are being motivated by fear. When we get afraid, our nervous systems are activated and it becomes harder, I think, to make rational decisions, or we are vulnerable. If you are led by fear, you will also feel compelled to act quickly, or you may feel like you have just one choice and you have to go with that choice. But in most situations, we have many choices if we just assess them. We may not like all choices, but it doesn't mean that we only have one. I heard a financial guru say years ago that when people get scared, they also get stupid. And I couldn't agree more. In fact, I think this is a human temptation. But when we receive advice, if the advice makes you afraid, or if the situation triggers fear, or maybe the person, the way that they're saying it doesn't make you afraid, but the situation itself triggers fear, I think we have to tread carefully. And we have to unpack what we're afraid of while also walking through what's the worst that can happen and how we might head off or how we might respond in those moments. But if you get afraid and you immediately jump to action without considering these things, you're probably not going to make a good decision or as good a decision as you could. The other question or thing that you should consider is, does the person who's giving you advice, do they understand who you are, your position in society, your social capital? When we're accepting advice, I think that we need to consider people who have walked the path that we're on or people who are experts in our field. We need to listen to people who have context on who we are, not just who we are in the moment, but where we're going, as well as our vulnerabilities. If someone knows you completely, or if they're an expert in the field that you need advice, that can be very helpful. Now, Anyone can give advice, and everyone has a notion for how we should live our lives. But depending on where you are in life, you want advice from people who understand your position, people who know what it's like to have some level of social capital, and people who are clear about what's at stake for you, not just today, but in the long term. The next thing that you should consider is, does the advice resonate as true for you? We should always be checking in with ourselves to determine our own sense of knowing. Sometimes we know what to do, we just mute our voice and our perspective, or we elevate the perspective of other people and we debase our own feelings and our own perspective. But I don't think we should accept anyone's advice without asking ourselves how it feels to us, how it's resonating for us. Is it resonating as the right thing to do? Is it resonating as true? Is it resonating as helpful? So before you take someone's advice and run with it, check in with yourself. The next thing that I think that we should consider is, will the advice benefit your current and your future self? There are things that feel good in the moment, but will harm our future self. We have to have a long-range view of where we're going and how we intend to get there. And we must evaluate every piece of advice that we receive from the lens of, is this going to help me today as well as tomorrow? Or is this something that will help me today, but it will create problems for me a year, 2 years, or more down the line? The next thing that I think that we should consider when evaluating advice is what our team of advisors or what our team of trusted confidants, what they think. I firmly believe that in the multitude of counsel, there is safety, and there's a biblical reference for that I'll put in the description. But in the multitude of counsel, there is safety. And if you want to make a good decision, you need to consult wise people, and you might want to consult more than one person. Now, I'm not saying that you go and you share your businesses with everyone, but if we are honest, each of us has a couple people in our life who we could go to for advice, and they will hold your situation and not share it. I'm not a proponent of taking one person's advice, especially if it's for a major decision, and running with it. It's imperative that we go to people who know us, people who have context about our personal and professional lives, and people who also have a history of advising us carefully, practically, and judiciously. If you have a person who consistently gives you bad advice, that's not someone who you want to immediately go to. And it doesn't matter if they are loud. It doesn't matter if they have a large platform. It doesn't matter if they are insistent that what they're saying is the right thing to do. You have to think about the history of the person who's giving you the advice, as well as what your team of advisors and friends think. My next and final point, as you think about how to make a good decision, is to think about whether or not you are being encouraged to act quickly. If you're being encouraged or rushed to make a snap decision, be careful. You should have time to process every piece of advice that you get and to think about where you want to go and why. You should have time to consult your team. You should have time to sit with the decision, because after all, once you make a decision, the only person who is going to live with the consequences of that decision, whether they be good or bad, is you. And very few things need to be decided in an instant. Very few things need to be decided in an hour or two. To the extent that you can slow the process down in order to play out different scenarios and discern what to do, that is the extent that you're probably going to make a better decision. For me personally, when someone is pushing me to make a decision right now, that's an immediate no. Because if I'm being pushed, if I'm being rushed, I can't possibly think about the entirety of the situation. So if someone wants me to act quickly based on emotion, that is an immediate no. If I can't have the time to process, I don't want to do it. Now, you may ask, why is this important? Well, our reputation is like currency. You must manage it wisely. But also, our peace is invaluable, and we must safeguard our peace. We may not always get a do-over, and once something disrupts your sense of peace, you can't always flip on a light switch and it's resolved right away. That is why it's essential to strive to make good decisions today and always, but also to carefully advise or carefully evaluate the advice that we get. So I hope this has been helpful. If you've not already subscribed, please do so, and you'll be notified whenever I post a new video.